Hello, comrades. My name is William Morrison. I'm your British Marxist-Leninist and anti-imperialist comrade based in Scotland, and this is my first live stream in a long time. And I'm joined by a recurring guest, Èamonn McGrunnagh. So, how are you doing today? How's it going?
I'm dead on. I'm just incredulous at the record of the SNP in Holyrood.
Yeah, absolutely. It's disgraceful, and we'll get into that later on. So yeah, you're Èamonn McGrunnagh. You're an Irish Republican Marxist-Leninist, and you're also
That's
behind
right.
the YouTube channel Alternative Political Analysis, which I will link in the comments and the description below, so you can check his channel out. But beyond that, if you want to introduce yourself just a little bit more, so the people who don't yet know you can get to know you a little bit better. Yeah, give yourself a couple minutes to promote yourself.
Well, as William said, I'm an Irish Republican Marxist-Leninist, and I have a Marxist-Leninist YouTube channel called Alternative Political Analysis, and I haven't done a video in about a month or so, but this is why I'm doing discussions such as this one, so that I can upload more content in the near future.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, massive shout out to your channel. I mean, it's been very, very useful how you do like weekly and monthly updates on situations. Very clear. Your live stream with Jean Lamb was very, very good and very elaborate, and that gained some traction. So that was great. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be a more informal, chilled out conversation. I'm drinking some non-alcoholic beer because I'm still being teetotal. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a pretty entertaining one for those who are interested in this kind of subject. But yeah, I mean, a lot has happened since our last live stream. So the last time we had a live stream together, we talked about the Gender Recognition Reform Act of Scotland, and we also talked about the Hate Crime Bill. And we just discussed about how those two bills working together was a huge problem for democracy and a huge problem for human rights of women and ordinary people in Scotland. And how, it was purposefully vague and there was loopholes. And that live stream got me kicked out of the Socialist Society of my university because they deemed it extremely transphobic. Although all we were criticising was the absolute erosion of women's rights that were going to happen under that Reform Act, and how very much trans and children and these very perverse ideas being almost normalised and accepted in wide-scale society. I mean, Ipsos Mori reports have further came out that said 80% of Scottish people did not support that bill, and yet it's been, that's kind of been swept under the rug. But 80% of Scottish people didn't want it, and most of those voters being in that survey, obviously being women themselves. But a lot has happened since that live stream. I mean, for example, Westminster blocked that bill. It was blocked by Westminster. They did not allow the SNP to pass that law. Also, of course, we had that court case of that double rapist who was thankfully sentenced correctly, finally, after a lot of mistakes by the law. He was finally sent to a male's prison after, raping two women and then wearing a wig in court and saying that he'd changed gender. And of course, now we have Nicola Sturgeon resigning over that. So a lot has happened since we last spoke. So if you want to speak on any of that, go ahead. But yeah, it's quite a loaded topic and a lot has happened. So yeah, just on you go,
You've just reminded me of a few things. When Liberals lost their shit over Michael Knowles' speech at CPAC, he said, eradicate gender ideology. And he also said that gender dysphoric people were poor people who had fallen victim to gender ideology. So his words and his criticism of gender ideology have been misinterpreted. And as brilliant a comedian as Jon Stewart is, he made an asinine point. So he did. He said, if you don't like children being exposed to drag shows, you should be more concerned with clerical child abuse. In fact, why not act against both? It's not an either or. And also, he says, taking children to a drag show doesn't kill them. And as someone made a similar point on the Hill from the opposite position, she said, child porn doesn't kill children. Should we allow that? And of course, the answer is no. So extend that same logic to the drag shows. And on the Westminster striking down the gender recognition reform bill, can not go to the British Supreme Court then, if the Scottish government appeals it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a shame, back in the 2000s, the early 2000s, in libraries, we saw, often female, support staff in libraries, educating children by reading out stories, reading out books. That's the kind of stuff that happened in the early 2000s. We had these great, enthusiastic kind of carers, and they were reading stories to children. Libraries were known as education hubs, especially in Scotland, but also across Britain. They were education hubs. And now what we have is drag shows being performed in libraries, exposing this in front of children. I understand that drag, isn't a sexuality, isn't anything like that, but it is a sexual performance. It has sexual connotations to it. And having these kind of performances in front of children in libraries who are supposed to be educational hubs, that are supposed to, teach kids about literature and how to read and build creativeness and imagination. Now they're just getting this stuff shoved down their throat. This is like a really gross, perverse sexualization of children. That's a really sad thing. So, I mean, yeah, it's quite gruesome what's happening. And to see that comparison about how libraries used to be. I mean, I used to go to my library all the time during the summer holidays. We used to have these book competitions where if you read 6 books in the summer holidays at school, you got this, you got this prize at the end. That was fun. It was fun. People were encouraged to read and educate themselves, and it was actually really, really fun. And now we just have these 5, 4, 5, 6-year-old children, 7-year-old children that are just having to see these drag artists perform these drag queen acts in front of children. I think it's quite gruesome. And now in schools our children are being taught that you can just change gender. I mean, you don't have to have any referral from a doctor. You don't have to get consent from your parents. A lot of schools and a lot of social media people actually encourage children not to tell their parents about how they feel and to just do what they want anyway. And I mean, these are kids. These are gullible people. They're open to susceptible. And yeah, I mean, this gender ideology, which it is that it's a gender ideology. It's an ideology. It isn't based in any material reality. I mean, a binary sex has existed in nature for millennia, since humans existed. I mean, a binary in sex existed long before humans were even a thing. I mean, humans have existed. Okay, well, religious people might disagree with this, but anthropologically, humans have existed for over 200,000 years. And even long before that, in plants and trees, and even in the dinosaurs, and archaeologists have studied dinosaur bones and bone density, there hasn't been a binary in sex. That is just a natural law. And no liberal ideology is going to change that overnight, especially not in the 15, 20 years that this debate has been going on for. It's absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, it's definitely a gender ideology. It isn't an actual movement. It's none of that. It's an ideology. And that's all it will be. That's all it will be. It will just be ideas. And of course, ideas can be confronted if we have an open, honest conversation, So yeah, if you want to say anything onto that.
I think people viewing this video should search Alfred Kinsey, John Money, and Volkmar Sigurd to understand where gender ideology came from. Human sexual dimorphism is a fact. And you said drag shows are a sexual performance. That is true. It was a sexual performance catering to fetishes in burlesque performances. So that is not appropriate for children. And as people familiar with the parental rights and education bill in Florida would know, conservatives call that to wait till 8 bill, because it only went up to 3rd grade and not further. And the Daily Wire reported that there is no biological basis for gender dysphoria. And one last thing before I forget, Matt Walsh calls drag performances woman face, and it is a pretty accurate description in my opinion.
That's pretty funny, yeah. I mean, Matt Walsh, a lot of people take Matt Walsh very, very seriously, and I respect him a lot on social and cultural issues. Obviously, economically and politically, he's a bit of an idiot. But I mean, like I made a video just a couple of days ago. I uploaded it, and it was a 7-minute video, and it was just kind of explaining my mentality going forward for this channel. And it's that, if you're the kind of person that's going to disregard or discredit somebody's entire belief system based on a couple of bad apple opinions that they have, then you should probably go ahead and unsubscribe to me, because I probably want nothing to do with you. I will cherry pick the things I like about everyone, and I'm willing to work with everyone about the issues that it makes sense to. So, I mean, I'll work with conservatives on social issues. I'll work with them, and that doesn't mean I have to agree with their economic fucking ideas. I'll work with people on the things that we'll both agree on. That's a productive thing to do. So that's my idea of going forward. So yeah, I mean, perhaps in the future, I mean, I've already shared videos of Caleb Maupin and Jackson Hinkle talking about specific issues that I happen to agree on. Doesn't mean that I'm endorsing their entire political ideology. It just means, oh, I saw that couple-minute clip and I liked it, and well, why wouldn't I use my platform to promote that? That's the kind of person I am. So in the future, you may very well see Matt Walsh clips on my channel. Doesn't mean I've converted to Christianity. Doesn't mean I've became a conservative. Doesn't mean I've became whatever people want to call him. I'm a Marxist-Leninist that just happens to agree with some of what he says. That's pretty much all it is to it. But I mean, yeah, drag shows are a sexual performance, and that is that. I mean, they'll admit that themselves. Like, this isn't some sort of conspiracy theory that we've just made up. They're open about that. That is what that is. It is a sexual performance, and a lot of, I mean, a fundamental tenet of drag shows is to over-sexualize the opposite gender. So a lot of male drag artists will over-sexualize women and kind of become this over-sexualized perception of what a woman is, and then do a performance. You can't say that that isn't sexual. Of course it is. That's ridiculous. And before I go on to the actual stream, what we're actually going to be talking about, just want to do a massive shout out to Dialectics Unhinged. He's an absolutely amazing and asset to the Marxist-Leninist and anti-imperialist movement. He's a great Canadian comrade over in Canada. I've spoken to him a couple of times, and I've done a lot of projects with him. He's absolutely amazing. Shout out to him too. But yeah, so in Scotland, another development in this liberal story that's happening right now. You sent me an article from the Scots Times. Scotsman, yeah. I don't even know the Scottish paper. You probably know the Scottish press more than I do. But yeah, so we saw an article from the Scotsman that said that the LGBT activists within the SNP are threatening to leave the SNP if they don't sort out their quote-unquote social issues, i.e. Regarding the Gender Recognition Reform Act. So if the SNP don't vehemently and buoyantly defend the Gender Recognition Reform Act, then these LGBT activists within the party will leave. So what are your thoughts on that, Comrade?
I think it is partly a demand by the LGBTQ lobby to get Hamza Yusuf, Kate Forbes, and Ash Regan to genuflect before they vote on the leadership. That's what I think it is. It's basically an attempt at a power move, when in reality it's the LGBTQ lobby threatening to storm off home and take the ball, when I don't believe they're large enough to have an influence on the SNP as a whole.
I mean, that's something that I'm actually worried about, because Scotland is such an open and progressive country, and often too progressive for its own good, that the LGBTQ lobby is actually huge in this country. And a lot of Americans watching this, or Canadians or Eastern Europeans, or people from the Eastern Hemisphere, might not understand this about Scotland, but we actually are already so heavily influenced by this gender ideology and by this the LGBTQ multiplied by times lobby. We're already heavily under the influence of that, and it's quite scary. I mean, I think in England, just down south of us in England, the LGBT community represents about 0.2% of the population. So it's about 60 million people, and the LGBT community are about 0.2% of the population. In Scotland, that's 5.2% of the population, 5% higher than in England, which is just a couple of 100 miles away. Well, I mean, you know, we're adjacent to the country. Those statistics cannot be based in actual reality. You can't take that statistic seriously. There can't actually tangibly be 5% higher people in this country that are claim to be LGBT or from that lobby, and then just down south a couple meters away, 0.2. You can't. This fabrication of society, this sociological phenomenon, cannot be based in material reality. There's a contradiction here, and the contradiction is obviously this is bullshit. This is not. This is artificial. There are women and there are men, and we have different biological functions. Doesn't mean that any one of us is better, is superior or inferior. We are just different. That's a good thing, and that difference has been brought by millions and hundreds of thousands of years of evolution that have brought us to this point. We are different. Or, I mean, if you're a Christian, Adam and Eve, of course. Regardless of what you are, there are a biological function that are different between us. And that's a good and healthy thing for Mother Nature. That's a good thing. I'm not sure why we need to change that. And you know, that even saying those cursed reactionary bigoted words will get people criticized and cancelled these days. And I'm really not sure why, but yeah, I had a point I was going to say, but I think I've just gone on such a tangent that I forgot what my main point was. But I mean, there's just a little rant, I guess. But yeah, so the LGBT, they've threatened to leave the SNP if they don't sort out their social issues. But I mean, whose social issues are we actually talking about? Because everybody has different, like on an individual basis, everybody has different social views. I mean, as a bi white man myself, I'll have different worries about society than other people. That's an individual thing. Like, so what social issues are we talking about? Of course, when it comes to these LGBT activists, they're talking about you know, the Gender Recognition Reform Act, and they're pretty much threatening the SNP, the Scottish National. Okay, sorry, for all who don't know, the SNP, which we're abbreviating that to, is a Scottish National Party. It's the governing and leading party in Scotland. They have a super majority in Parliament, and yeah, they're a nationalist party who want independence, and they currently have a majority. And the leader of the SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, has been through a lot of controversy recently because she said that she would let trans women in female prisons, and then she did just that, and then 2 women got raped in relation to that. So she's now U-turned, resigned, and there's now currently a leadership race within the SNP. It's an absolute shambles. So for those who didn't know that, I hope that brings an ounce of context to what we're talking about. But yeah, so she's resigned now. But yeah, whose social issues are we talking about? And of course, the LGBT activists. But they, like I said, even though 5.2% is a big proportion compared to England, it's still a very, very small minority in comparison to women, you know, actual biological women, an adult human female, you know, who has a womb and a cervix and a vagina. Those are the people we're talking about. Those old-fashioned dinosaur, you know, these old-fashioned women, you know, actual women. They are 50% of the population. So, I mean, I don't know whose social issues we're talking about. And then also the second question, where are they going to go? We talked about this before we went live. They have nowhere to actually go, these LGBT activists. where are they going to? They can't go to the Liberal Democrats because they're a unionist party, so they don't want independence. They can't go to the Conservatives, which is the opposition party in Scotland. They have, 500,000 people every election vote for the Conservatives. People say that Scotland is a very liberal society, and it is, but we also have a large chunk of Conservatives, hence why they're opposition. They won't go to Labour, because again, Labour is also a unionist. They don't want independence. I guess they can go to the Green Party, which is this tiny fringe environmentalist party, or they can go to ALBA, which is Alex Salmond's party, which is just a Bonapartist split within the Scottish bourgeois. Both the SNP and the ALBA party want independence, but they've kind of divided that vote. So I guess they can go there too. But the question is, like, seriously speaking, where do you think we're going to end up, if they are going to end up anywhere? Like, seriously.
I honestly think they'll go to the Greens.
The Greens.
Because of the social issues. Also, 80% opposed to the gender recognition reform bill is greater than 5.2%. And another thing, where do pro-independence social conservatives go? Who do they vote for? Or are they just politically homeless? And before finish here, I just want to reiterate, men are naturally ordered towards impregnations and women are naturally ordered towards gestation.
Thank you. Thank you for that very, very simple biological fact that most people hopefully do agree with. And if they don't agree with that, then they're not watching the right video. But yeah, that question on where do social conservatives who are pro-independence go, I don't know. I honestly don't know. There is not a party yet there's a party of that does not exist yet in Scotland. I guess they would be politically homeless, which is an interesting thought. Yeah, I never really thought about that. But yeah, I guess they would be politically homeless. Socially, people who happen to be socially conservative and pro-independence, they'd probably vote SNP. They'd probably vote SNP. I know a lot of people. I go to the ice hockey and stuff to speak to ordinary folk there at the ice hockey, and they wouldn't class themselves as socially conservative. They just class themselves as normal. But what I mean by that is they're like us. They're just normal people. They oppose what's going on. They think that this is ridiculous and stuff has gone way too far with identity politics and diversity and stuff like that. They'd be kind of classed as socially conservative, and a lot of them do vote SNP. And a lot of them obviously are disappointed with Nicola Sturgeon with what she's done, but a lot of them are willing to give the SNP another chance because, again, they're so fixated on independence that they are willing to still vote for the SNP no matter what cringy shit that they do. They're still willing to vote for the SNP because they think that is the party that can vessel independence. So I guess that's an answer to your question. They will still vote SNP regardless because people here, if you're supportive of independence here in Scotland, that's you live, breathe, and sleep independence. That's all you can talk about. That seems to happen quite a lot. I can't speak for them. You can figure that out by yourself. I don't know. Obviously, I'm opposed to independence, so I don't really know. It's not really a question that I've had to consider. But yeah.
As I said in our first discussion, I believe there is a need for a pro-independence Marxist-Leninist party, even if it's just to give the people in Holyrood a kick up the backside. And another thing, why don't people who are pro-independence and socially liberal not vote for ALBA and the Greens, if only to give the SNP a kick up at the backside? And as you said in our first discussion, communists vote for the SNP. Why? like, it was founded by fascists, and it's still a cringeworthy party. So why would anyone interested in a communist Scotland vote for the SNP?
Okay, yeah, I did say that in the first live stream, but in hindsight, looking back and with some more insight now, many months after I said that, I have found a lot of communists that hate the SNP. The main communists that I were talking about in Scotland were members of the YCL, the Young Communist League, and the CPB, Communist Party of Britain. They were when I was a member of them, before they kicked me out, they were very, very nationalistic, even though that was in spite of their policy. The CPGB's policy on independence was that they kind of opposed it. They wanted progressive federalism, which is they wanted a British federative unionist, socialist republic. But most members of the YCL did not agree with that. They wanted independence. They wanted a communist Scotland, and they didn't really care much for the English working class. And they were quite happy to choose the Scottish bourgeois over the English working class, which I thought was quite perverted. And yeah, they'd been kind of trapped in this kind of neoliberal hegemony for so long that they'd kind of just been exposed to that. But yeah, I don't think they'd ever vote Alba. I mean, communists are educated people. Most of them, I mean, I'd like to hope so. Most of us are educated. I don't think they'd ever vote Alba. I mean, Alex Salmond has links to pedophilia. He has 2 open court cases about him sexually exploiting minors. He's a very perverted person, and regardless of his politics, I don't think any competent communist would ever consider voting for the Alba party, considering their connections with Alex Salmond and his perverted private life. But yeah, no, there are many communists that now that I've met. I mean, I wish I knew them when we had our first conversation. But yeah, actually, I figured out that it's about 50-50. About 50-50. 50% of the communists I know who are Scottish do want independence. They'd rather an independent Scotland. We'd rather just disassociate ourselves from England and their past and their history. And then the other 50% are folks like me who like to kind of, have a Soviet-style kind of federative socialist British Republic. Republic being the key word, we would remove the royal family, of course. But yeah, no, I just think a unified federative British Republic would be best. And I mean, I think this whole issue with the LGBT activists and this Gender Recognition Reform Act, I think that's actually made a lot of people, even ordinary people, see that maybe we aren't safe in the hands of the SNP. Maybe we aren't safe as an independent Scotland. We were so close to having that bill passed, and it was thanks to the Westminster. And I will not often praise. I will very seldom praise Westminster and the Conservative Party down there. But that was one time in years that I've actually praised them. Because if it was not for them blocking that bill might very well have gone through. A slap in the face to 80% of Scottish people who voted against it, and a slap in the face to ordinary biological women that would have had their rights absolutely eroded, and they would have felt completely unsafe. They would have been exposed. Every single private space of theirs would have been invaded and exposed. Just gruesome stuff. Really seriously, and there's been a rise in sexual assault cases already because of these laws. And I mean, yeah, any country in the world looking and even considering these kind of laws, please take notes from Scotland. It doesn't work. This bullshit doesn't work because it isn't based in natural law. Regardless of your political ideology, I don't care what religion or gender or race or political association you come from. Just look at what's happening in Scotland. You cannot possibly think that this is right, what's happening. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious that this should be opposed. And yeah, I'm going to get a lot of hate for saying this, obviously, but I mean, it is what I truly believe. And yeah, I mean, I've been cancelled. I don't really care anymore. I've been cancelled so many times, it doesn't really affect me anymore. So yeah, I don't really care. But Yeah, I guess if you want to talk a little bit about, I mean, we have time. It's up to you if you want to have a little talk about independence if you want. But I do think that definitely that this whole thing with Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP and the Gender Recognition Reform Act, that has actually changed the minds of a lot of nationalists who would have happily voted SNP. This is the issue that's actually changed their mind, and a lot of people are saying, and I'm speaking at the ice hockey, there's lots of elderly people that have voted SNP for 20, 30 years, and at the ice hockey they're saying, I will never vote for the SNP ever again because of what they've done to women and the harm that they've done. I'll never vote for them again. And whoever is willing to take their place, that's what I'll vote for. And of course, that will be the Conservatives. So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
It seems politically naive, like to try and push something so controversial through before holding another referendum when it's still going to be fresh in people's minds. As you said, do we want these clowns at Holyrood to have more power? Is basically the question, because of their ineptitude on this social issue. Like, I think that's going to hit what would have been a big yes vote, because people are reticent now because they think, do we really want to give a socially authoritarian party like the SNP more power over our lives or less? And on the gender recognition reform bill being vetoed by Westminster, I don't think that's an argument against an independent Holyrood. I think that's an argument against the SNP being in government, because if you don't elect the SNP, you could have your independent Holyrood without taking such an extreme position, which is out of step with 4/5 of Scotland. 4/5.
Yes, definitely.
Like, that's a big majority. Over 3/4.
I mean, firstly, yeah, it was definitely political suicide to force this vote through Parliament less than a year before a supposed second independence referendum. We're also scheduled to have Scottish parliamentary elections 2024, so that's not that far away either. That's this controversy will still be fresh in the minds of Scottish people in 2024. I think it's April 2024. We'll have Scottish parliamentary elections, which is our general elections. Like, that's a big deal. That's like the US presidential elections for us. So it was they shot themselves in the foot. I'm not sure what they were thinking passing this law. So at this time, it was just it was like, just political suicide, really, what they were doing. But yeah, like I said, it's difficult being, if you are pro-independence and happen to be socially conservative, it is quite difficult to navigate Scotland, and a lot of those folk are politically homeless because every single pro-independence party in Scotland is socially liberal, and they absolutely supported the SNP's legislation on the Gender Recognition Reform Act. So it's difficult. If you were opposed to that, but you still want independence, I honestly could not advise you on what party to vote for, because there isn't a party that would best represent you. And it's sad, I mean, Scotland is known for being quite much better democratically than England. I mean, in England and Wales, at a British level, we have first past the post, which is quite an undemocratic system. It often means a minority gets the majority, like a minority vote gets majority seats in Parliament, which is not fair. Scotland is not like that. We have an AMS system. We have the proportional representation system. We have regional list seats, and the other one, which I can't remember. But we have 129 seats, and they are split up into two lists. And so it's a lot more transparent. It's a lot more complex. It's a lot more difficult to understand, but it is a little bit fairer, slightly fairer, I guess. I mean, it's still representative, and I'm a big fan of Gaddafi, and I'm currently going through the Green Book with him on my YouTube series, and I kind of agree with what he says. I think that any form of representative democracy is an authoritarian structure, because it can't possibly the representative of the whole people, and over time it will cause an antagonism, and it will just cause yet another class antagonism between the representative and the non-represented, the electorate. But regardless of Ba'athist political philosophy, yeah, I really, it's difficult. I mean, I know a lot of socially conservative, well, not really, so just normal working class people. I don't like calling them socially. I don't like giving them a label. These are just ordinary working class people that are seeing the bullshit that's happening. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Maybe we should take a step back and maybe reconsider. Like, these people aren't extremists. They're not reactionaries. They're just normal people trying to, you know, these people have to choose between heating their homes and like feeding themselves. Like, we're living in a cost of living crisis. Neoliberalism has completely failed here. We're living in a decaying society. Things are getting worse and worse every year. And yet the SNP, all they seem to care about is independence and allowing people to change gender. Like, nothing else matters to them. Austerity continues, poverty continues to rise, unemployment continues to rise. Ordinary working folk, their material conditions are being ignored, are being worsened and deteriorating on a day-to-day basis. I mean, male suicides are going up. 5 years ago, suicide was the biggest killer of men under the age of 50. Only 5 years later, that number has increased to the age of 54. So in 5 years, it's gone up by 4 years, age-wise. So yeah, I think in 2018, suicide was the biggest cause of death between men aged between 18 and 50. That's now 18 and 54. And that's happened in just 5 years. That has to be something to do with the cost of living crisis and what's going on right now with inflation and just stuff being passed on to Russia and China. And it's like, look at what's happening. Like, these energy companies in Britain are making record mass profits on a year-to-year basis as people are getting poorer. We're seeing the biggest polarization of wealth in our society since deindustrialization under Thatcher, probably. And of course, a lot of men and a lot of people, a lot of working class folk are only going to see one option, and that is to commit suicide. And that's an absolutely harrowing and staggering fact, and it's disgusting. That's normalized in that society, and 75% of everyone who commits suicide are men. It's like we're living in such a desperate society, and yet all the SNP seem to care about is virtue signaling and making themselves look as progressive and as woke as possible. Most people don't care about that. Most people don't care. Most people just want to live and maintain a dignified and stable existence. And we're not even getting that. Like, that's the bare minimum, and most people aren't even getting that now, because the SNP and most liberal and degenerate societies are too busy focusing their attention on other fringe, stupid shit that it doesn't matter and people don't really care about, and it doesn't help anyone on any decent level. It's just virtue signaling and identity politics, and it's a race to the bottom. So, sorry, yeah, I've run it there for quite a while. Go ahead and respond to that if you want.
I think if the SNP or anyone in Holyrood was smart, they would do a jobs program. Also, if they think the mental health and suicide crises are bad now, what do they think it's going to be like after they push their gender ideology? And also, in pushing gender ideology, that means the SNP's vote share is going to go down. So that means less members elected and less additional members on proportionality getting into Holyrood. So would that not enable Labour, Lib Dems and the Tories just to vote as a unionist bloc against them?
Speaking about suicide rates, that's really interesting. That's something I've talked about quite a lot, especially amongst the trans community. A lot of people say that, we have to stop discriminating and bullying and oppressing the trans community because suicide rates are a lot higher. And that is based in fact. Suicide rates are about 45% higher than the average population. But doesn't that indicate that this isn't just about bullying and discrimination? There's something mentally going on behind scenes. It's such a big proportion. Like, yeah, okay, the average national suicide rate in Britain is about 4%. With the trans community, it's about 14 or 15%. It's a huge increase. That disparity can't just be caused by people being mean and people bullying or discriminating against people. Surely that is also an indication, if you interpret it a different way, an indication that these people, a lot of them, are mentally ill and have other issues going on. And Matt Walsh, in his documentary "What Is a Woman," he went into that, and he found out on a survey in America that about 85% of so-called trans and non-binary people also had other mental disorders, diagnosed mental disorders, alongside that, from autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression, bulimia, anorexia, sleeping issues, alcohol dependency, drug addiction, schizophrenia. These issues, 85% of the people in America in the survey describing themselves as non-binary or trans had these issues connected to them. So this isn't an isolated issue. This is connected to a larger, broader mental health crisis, and that's something that is just miraculously not looked at. We're not talking about that.
And as Dr. Miriam Grossman said in What Is a Woman, she says a lot of these kids were depressed and suicidal before they'd ever discovered gender ideology. So if it's really gender dysphoria causing the discomfort, how does that explain their mental health issues prior to discovering gender ideology? It doesn't.
Another example for how this can be perverted is that I have an old friend now that used to be my friend in primary school, and during high school he was pretty open about the fact that he was gay. And he was a homosexual, he was gay, that was fine. People accepted it. I mean, homosexuality, I mean, come on, like, that was fine. But then he started acting out in school. He started acting out, and he got expelled or excluded a couple of times. So he was sent to like a bad boys home, and so I didn't see him for about 2 years. And when he got, released from that home, he had changed gender. He had started identifying as a different name. He had grown out his hair. He was wearing a wig. He was wearing makeup. He had this feminine kind of camp voice that he never used to have before. He used to be a manly man, but he was gay. That was fine. He used to play football. He used to like working out. He used to like cycling. He liked snooker and pool. He liked having a few pints and stuff. Well, not at that age, but he talked about drinking quite a lot. He was just an average bloke. But yeah, he was gay. That was fine. It was like, all right, yeah, he's cool. But then, yeah, he went to this bad boy school because he was acting out, and they pretty much they indoctrinated him. He was like, oh, well, maybe why you're acting out is because you're internalizing some stuff inside you, and maybe, are you sure? Do you feel like you were born in the wrong gender? And these adults, these professional counselors, pushed these ideas onto him, and they made him think that over time that, oh, I'm not gay. I was actually born in the wrong body, and I'm actually a woman. And if I had just changed gender, then I'd be straight again. And they thought that changing his gender would be a perfectly rational solution to his homosexuality. I mean, that's insane. And I went to a mass rally in Glasgow with Posey Parker. And Posey Parker is she's made a name for herself about a lot of things, but she's mainly a women's rights activist. She speaks against this trans mob quite a bit, these ideologues. And yeah, I saw her speak, and I saw a lot of women speak there in Glasgow. And yeah, a lot of them are saying, I would rather have a gay son than a transgender son, or a son that's a trans woman. Like, a lot of these women, just listen, let women speak, just listen to the actual women of our society. They would rather have a gay son that had friends and that were mentally stable and were physically fit, compared to having this mentally ill trans woman who had been just completely brainwashed by professional counselors. I mean, if you're a parent and you had to make that choice, of course you'd choose the homosexual son any day of the week. I'm sure most people would rather that. Yeah, again, it's just absolutely insane. That's just one example, but I'm sure there's thousands of people in Scotland like my friend, have gone through similar stuff. They've gone into therapy or counselling, or they've gone to bad boy schools, and these ideas have been pushed onto them, and these seeds have been.
And was that in juvenile detention he was transed? That's one of the last places I'd expect to find gender ideologues, but it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Also, that practice is known as transing away the gay. And Jordan Peterson, in his interview with Kyle Kalinske, said that 80% of gender dysphoric youth who do not go through gender affirmation turn out to be gay and homosexual adults. So that shows you what's happening. So it's not just depressed youth with mental health issues. It's, as I said before, transing away the gay. And the same imperial establishment who support this have the audacity to accuse the Islamic Republic of Iran of transing away the gay. It is just projection and transference on their part, accusing Iran of what the West is doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was just about to use that example, that how Iran is quite famous in the West for being so homophobic that they're actually supportive of transitioning and people changing gender. I just think that's a complete disingenuous way to look at the law in Iran, and Iran doesn't stand for any of that stuff. They are a very proud Islamic republic. They don't agree with any of that. They follow the Quran. All of that is haram, trans and gay. I mean, that's, they take it pretty far. I just think it's just imperialist virtue signaling. It's like, oh well, I mean, if we can do it, and even Iran's doing it, so it must be right. And it's like, it's just like this condescending national chauvinistic attitude towards Iran. And it's like, no, they're doing it for completely different reasons. And I think that this isn't a thing that happens all the time in Iran. I think that in the last year, there's been 3 transitions. And it was, thinking by a doctor in a court, and it was like these people had been filmed to be homosexual, and they were given a choice. They'd choose gender, or they would spend like 15 years in jail. And if these people, obviously chose to just change gender because it would be easier, but I mean, I think 2 of those 3 people have ended up committing suicide after that. So it's a harmful thing. So yeah, I mean, you can think about what you want with Iran. I don't agree with Iran's sexual policies, but it has nothing to do with me. They're a very Islamic country, and I respect Islam a lot. And Iran is a useful asset to the anti-imperialist movement, and they're a fierce supporter of Palestine and Syria and Lebanon and other useful anti-imperialist states. And I as a random Scottish guy, have no right to judge Iran in any way. But yeah, I just think that it's a very disingenuous representation of what's actually going on in Iran. And yeah, they aren't pro-trans, and even the people that they have transitioned, because they happen to be homosexual, most of them end up committing suicide because they regret it and they hate it. And I mean, it's nonsense what we're being told about Iran, really.
But you said that was within the last year.
Yeah. So
that Swedish study says it's at its worst 7 to 10 years after the transition. So what's going to happen to the third one in about 6 or 7 years' time? Yeah.
This law has only been in effect since 2018, so about 4 or 5 years. And the first year, only 1 person was transitioned. The second year, I don't know how. I didn't read that article. And then the third and fourth, it was about 3 people each year. It's a tiny, less than 10 in the last 4 or 5 years have actually, that law has been a thing. It's not used at all. It's like when people say that, Belarus, the country in Eastern Europe, they have the death penalty. the last time Belarus executed somebody, used the death penalty, was like 13 years ago, and it was this serial rapist, and he also happened to be a Polish agent, so he was executed because he was an enemy of the state. That was like 13 years ago. Just because a country has a law doesn't mean that they use it all the time. There are about 45% of countries use the death penalty, but about a third of those countries have only used the death penalty haven't used the death penalty in over 5 years. So just because a country has a law doesn't mean they use it all the time. So yeah, Iran does have that law, and regardless of what your opinion on it, it's used. Like, Iran is a country of over
70 million.
70 million. It's about the same population as Britain, and they barely use this law. It's nonsense. I mean, Scotland wants to mass trans children, and that's okay because Scotland's a beautiful utopia and everything's perfect here, and it's all rainbows and butterflies. Rainbows being the yeah. But yeah, no. When Iran does it, it's draconian and authoritarian, and they're forcing people to be trans. So are we, just in a different way, because we use a little bit of nuance and a little bit of aversion, and we teach our kids that in schools, so they grow up thinking that they can be literally anything they want. That's the cultural difference there. Iran's a little bit more forthcoming from that.
And Iran is the country where Christianity is growing faster than any other country. And Christianity, of course, is one of Iran's 5 official religions, the others being Sunni Islam, Shia Islam, Judaism, and Zoroastrianism.
I didn't know that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're so anti-Semitic that they reserve a seat in Parliament for a Jewish cleric, and the Jews in Tehran support the Ayatollah and not Israel. But yeah, that's obviously a hotbed of anti-Semitism there, isn't it?
Yeah, Iran is just a genocidal state that they just want to wipe out the Israeli. Yeah, they just want to wipe out Jews. Clearly, yeah.
But did you know that apart from Palestine, no country has as many Jews in the Middle East as Iran?
Yeah. Iran is one of the most welcoming countries to different religions. When Muslims go to Israel, they're persecuted and they're evicted from their homes and they're almost genocided on a daily basis. But when Jews go to Iran and Jordan and Syria and Yemen, they're treated like human beings. It's very, very telling, the dialectics of that.
Also, those religious communities, could not exist in Saudi Arabia. Even the Shia population in the east there, on the Gulf, suffer discrimination under the apartheid laws of Saudi Arabia. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No, wow.
And while they live on some of the richest oil fields in the world, the monarchy takes the profits and doesn't invest in their communities, and they live in poverty because of it. But they did a peace deal with Iran, and everyone's going, isn't this so great? No, I don't want to sanitize that barbaric ally of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to sanitize it while there's a genocide ongoing in Yemen. So yeah, I'm not going to sanitize those butchers, because it makes people feel good, and they can pretend that KSA is anti-imperialist. It's been the imperialist guard dog of that region with its ally for the best part of a century or more.
Spot on. Yeah, absolutely. Iran is a really, really complex, but it's also really, really fascinating if you actually go into the history and current day geopolitics of the Middle East. It's and the Arab world generally. It's really, really fascinating. But we're reaching about an hour, so I'm going to do our closing statements. So you go first, comrade. Just if you want to say anything or promote anything else for yourself, or if you just want to go over and reiterate some of the points we've already discussed, just go ahead and do your closing statement.
I think the Scottish government would be better served looking after the conditions, the economic conditions of working class people, as opposed to pushing a socially liberal agenda, which will not assist in their efforts for an independent Scotland, nor will it improve the lot of the Scottish people, and it will not help relations with Westminster or anyone else for that matter. So why push it?
Well, thank you very much for that closing statement. Again, I will link Èamonn's own channel in the description below, so you can check his channel out, and please subscribe. Huge shout out to his channel. He does great content and great updates, labour updates, and all sorts. I mean, he's quite a multifaceted channel. So yeah, check him out. And without further ado, I mean, solidarity and comradeship to you all. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you in the next live stream, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheerio.